Time now is 3 o'clock. South King Fire Board Fire Commissioner Special Meeting is now in session. Today is February 3rd, 3 o'clock. Commissioner Gates, would you please pledge allegiance? Just so everyone knows, Commissioner Burris is online virtual today. Commissioner comments? Commissioner Fuller, do you have any comments? Thank you. Commissioner Vedino?
Nothing for me.
Commissioner Gates?
No comments.
And nothing for me at this time. So we are down to item number 4, which is interview interim fire chief candidate in open session. And Mr. Mark Chubb will be joining us. He is virtual. Is he online? Mr. Chubb, my name is Greg Bruce. I'm the chair of the Board of Fire Commissioners. We have Commissioner Fuller on my left, Commissioner Vedino on my right, and to the far right is Commissioner Gates. Again, Commissioner Burris is online and will be participating this time. So I want to thank you for your interest in the position of interim fire chief at South King Fire. Board members are going to ask you some pre-written questions here in open session and in executive session. Please be concise as possible in answering questions in order that we can provide equal time to all candidates. We will now begin our review questions in open session. Commissioner Gates, please ask your first question to Mr. Chubb, please.
What makes you chief of South King?
I'm sorry, I can't hear Commissioner Gates.
What makes you unique for the position of interim fire chief of South King Fire?
I think my most unique qualification is the diversity of experience that I bring, both in terms of my public sector experience as a fire officer, but also the private and nonprofit experience I bring. My experience in the municipal fire service includes service in Washington State and service in New Zealand, where I was an area commander with the fire service in Christchurch for a period of 7 years. I've also have considerable academic experience in leadership development programs in Portland, Oregon, and through the John Jay College of Criminal Justice in New York, where I was an adjunct professor. My experience in the private sector includes leading an engineering consultancy and helping grow its revenue by a factor of tenfold while bringing on board new staff and developing them for roles as consulting engineers. Many of them were young graduates when we first hired them. So I have extensive experience with staff development and business development in the private sector as well. And my nonprofit experience spans a number of different environments. Most of them are policy related, including service in New Zealand, in Bangladesh, where I led a factory safety initiative in the country for a period of about 18 months, where I was leading a team of 40 local engineers to remediate unsafe conditions in about 850 factories that employed more than 2.25 million people.
Thank you. Who is your ideal leader and why?
I'd be hard pressed to point to a single leader that I find ideal. I think the qualities that I find most attractive in leaders are openness, honesty, and integrity. One of the things that I've prided myself on during my public service career, my business career, and my nonprofit career is upholding high ethical standards for myself and my staff. And I think that's probably my most important value as a leader. But I've also found that it's very important to articulate a clear vision, maintain communication with staff, and invest in their development as well as your own. So my experience is that the best leaders develop their organizations and they lead from a position of value and vision.
Thank you.
Please describe your experience as a fire chief or a fire department or chief executive officer of an organization?
Three positions in the past that I'll highlight. The first was in New Zealand, where I served as the area commander and chief fire officer of Christchurch. It's a city of about 500,000 people in the South Island. We had 6 stations were staffed by completely paid career staff. The remainder were staffed by volunteers. We had about 42 permanent paid positions on duty every day, augmented by our volunteer force. We maintained a close relationship with the Christchurch City Council as well as district councils serving the neighboring jurisdictions around Christchurch. In addition to my role in Christchurch, I also held a portfolio overseeing the fire safety department for about half of the South Island, and was responsible for another 60 fire stations across the South Island. When I came back to the United States in 2007, I taught at Portland State University. When the Great Recession really dug in and the program I was teaching in was defunded by the university, I moved to Woodinville, and I was the deputy fire chief of operations there, and then became the interim fire chief from 2010 through 2013. During that time, we were subject to annexations by Kirkland and Bothell. So I led during a very difficult time for the organization as it managed transitions for staff and began negotiating a new collective bargaining agreement while simultaneously negotiating with neighboring jurisdictions over annexation. I left in 2013 to take up the position of fire chief in Skyway, King County Fire District 20, and I led there for 2 years before I was recruited to lead the factory safety initiative in Bangladesh.
Oh, fuck, dude.
Oh, yeah, the commissioners meeting. Whoever's on the mic. Please
Just gonna wait
mute
till
your
we
mic if you're on, please. Thank you.
All right, I think we got that squared away. What would be your highest priority and lowest priority when becoming the interim fire chief?
Well, I think my highest priority is to build on the work that you've already done through your bridge strategic plan. The jurisdictions you serve have recently updated or are in the process of updating their comprehensive plans with significant growth management objectives in those regional plans. Positioning the fire district to service those communities as they continue to grow at a very rapid pace has to be a priority, especially given the efforts you've made to improve the sustainability of your funding model. So developing a strategic plan in partnership with the jurisdictions we serve, with the local, with other community stakeholders, I think is the highest priority for me coming into a leadership position, because it's essential to do that to position the organization for success. I know there's unfinished business under the bridge plan that still needs to be undertaken, particularly in the area of communication and accountability, and I look forward to making that part of the agenda as well. As far as the lowest priority, one of the things that strikes me about the district in its 75-year history is it has very qualified staff. It has maintained a high service level, even in the face of rapidly increasing demand for services. The last thing they need is another chief who's primarily interested in their operational activities and interfering in the day-to-day operation of the fire stations. I want to be there to support them in that effort. I think you have plenty of qualified officers to lead the operational day-to-day operation of the fire service. You don't need the fire chief pestering people about that. At the same time, we need to make sure that there's communication across stations, across watches, and across the entire organization so that we can lead with unity of purpose.
Thank you.
Before we go on, Commissioner Burris, I want to make sure you have the right set of questions. You should have them on the first page.
Yes, pre-written questions, fourth one down. I read it verbatim.
Okay. I just want to make sure you have the right ones. Oh, there are some questions that are highlighted in yellow.
Did we put out a new one in the last day?
Stand by. Sorry, Mr. Chubb, just a minute. I want to
worries.
clarify something. So, oh, you want to go and answer? We're doing that.
What have you done to improve your knowledge in the last year?
Well, I'm enrolled in the Seattle Fire Department's Executive Leadership Academy, which is a program that's available across the region. It's led by the Foster School of Business. It's been an opportunity for me to re-engage with leadership education, see what's new in the field, meet fire officers from across the region who are also engaged in a cohort style leadership development program. And it's given me an opportunity to be involved in some leadership coaching, receive leadership coaching, get assessments of my leadership strengths and weaknesses, and continue to refine my abilities. Been a very good program so far.
Commissioner Burris, I'm going to delay on your questions because you must have the older list. So I'm going to ask your question for you. Mr.
Okay.
Chubb, until you get that. Mr. Chubb, what is your philosophy about labor relations?
I think the most important thing in labor relations is transparency and regular communication. I've mentioned my experience in Woodinville. It was a fairly traumatic experience. I didn't know when I accepted the position there that there was a pretty deep-seated labor management dispute going on with the fire chief who hired me. My second day on the job as deputy fire chief, we were in a IAFC, IAFF labor management mediation session that I had no idea I would be attending until I reported for work the first day. The fire chief that hired me resigned about 6 to 9 months later. I can't remember the exact time frame. And I was left with many unresolved grievances and unfair labor practice complaints to deal with, as well as a pending contract negotiation. And that was all occurring during the annexation process. The local in Woodinville had expressed a very strong preference for amalgamating with another jurisdiction and trying to form an RFA or to enlarge the fire district. That was very difficult to do. It was very difficult to meet those expectations in an environment where we were subject to annexations. The jurisdictions that were seeking to annex portions of the district had no reason to negotiate with us. In fact, the annexations helped them with a very significant problem that a merger would not have resolved. It probably just would have made their problems worse. One of those jurisdictions is still trying to form an RFA. So, it was very difficult in that environment to improve the dialogue because it was so off the rails when I got there. But I learned a lot from what didn't go right about what needs to be done to develop a strong working relationship. I was very pleased to see in reading back over your minutes from previous meetings, a strong endorsement of your efforts as a board of fire commissioners in getting the fire benefit charge passed and moving forward with a sustainable funding model. I think that's an important foundation to build on. I think the items identified in the strategic bridge plan reflect the kinds of things I would expect the labor unit to be asking for in terms of accountability and in terms of communication. And I look forward to meeting with the executive board to chart a path forward with very specific deliverables around those things. I think it's important that that we're all on the same page, labor and management, when it comes to the future of the fire district and the people we serve.
Thank you.
Do you have experience in interest arbitration?
Yes, when I started the negotiations, we opened the contract negotiations with Woodinville Fire and Rescue. I advanced several interest-based proposals. The local and the fire district in Woodinville had not previously engaged in interest-based bargaining, so it was a very new experience. but we were specifically interested, the commissioners and I were specifically interested in trying to address some issues related to overtime costs and the staffing model in an interest-based manner. We felt that that was the most constructive way to engage the union by sharing with them our concerns about sustainability in a very open, transparent fashion, and asking them to work with us to co-produce a set of conditions for managing those things through the collective bargaining agreement that would produce a more sustainable staffing model, a more sustainable financial situation with regard to overtime and benefits, and that would meet their members' needs as well.
Do you understand the difference between position-based and interest-based bargaining?
I believe I do. Yes. I mean, what we tried to do in Woodinville was to identify what the board's interests were in terms of managing that. And our request of the union was to identify what their members' interests were, and then to try to work in the space in between without regard primarily for the positions that the collective bargaining agreement set us up for, which delineated very specific work rules around how time was accumulated. The way that they had managed time off had created a situation where our legal counsel in Woodinville had advised us that we were probably in breach of the Fair Labor Standards Act. And that situation, the way that they bargained, had created an excess leave qualification situation that was leading to excessive overtime. So, we were very transparent about what our objective was and asked the local to identify what their members' interests would be, what they wanted to preserve out of the existing arrangement if we were to move forward in a different direction.
Commissioner
So, Chair,
Burris, are you on?
I believe I've got the updated questions now.
Okay.
We'll give it a try.
Alrighty.
So based upon your knowledge of South King Fire and its demographics, identify the program areas you would focus upon and describe how you would intend to undertake the tasks of an interim chief during the first 6 months on the job.
I think one of the biggest challenges that South King shares with most of its neighbors and really all of King County is the continued increase in demand for low acuity EMS services. And I see that you've made significant investment in a mobile integrated health program and have budgeted in 2025 an MIH nurse position. I think that's an important step forward in terms of trying to manage demand for services, but also it reflects a need to invest in a more comprehensive approach to dealing with the diverse demands that are being placed on fire services today. You serve one of the most diverse communities in King County. Skyway was a similarly diverse community. We had no majority population. The population was roughly a third Caucasian, a third Hispanic, and a third African and African American. We had a very large Asian population as well. So we had to learn to engage those communities in ways different than the fire service had previously engaged them. And I think the way that you've restructured your fire prevention program under a community risk reduction model is another piece of thinking about how to understand client needs, citizen needs differently, and how to embrace the diversity in the community, how to provide services in a different way. I think my priority in terms of all this is in terms of understanding what's driving demand and how we can work with stakeholders to manage the growth in demand, particularly in low acuity services, because that's leading to shortages of unit availability, and it's leading to a stressful workplace for employees. I know that you've got an L&I leave management objective in your capital plan. You're doing some work in that area. I don't know what your L&I experience is, but I know from other fire departments I've worked with and currently work for Seattle, I know that our biggest exposure right now is in employee well-being. And most of our time off these days is not from physical injuries, but from the psychological and emotional trauma that our members experience.
fire departments and law enforcement agency in Seattle, as well as across the state, are finding it very difficult to attract qualified and diverse applicants for firefighter positions. Discuss your philosophy and techniques related to recruitment and retention of personnel.
I think everybody's first priority needs to be on retention. You know, we invest a lot in the staff that we have, and we need to make sure that we're maintaining an environment in the workplace that keeps them engaged, keeps them healthy, keeps them interested in serving a long and productive career with the agency. When it comes to recruitment, I think you know, what I'm optimistic about with regard to recruitment, notwithstanding the challenges that some agencies have experienced, is that the younger generation, I have two daughters, one's 30, one's 28, their cohort is very idealistic. They're very service oriented. They understand that they live in a diverse and interconnected world, and they want to make a difference. And I think that's always been an attractive element for fire services. It's always been something that we could count on as an attraction. You know, what's keeping some people away is that the work that we're doing today is much more challenging in some respects, particularly psychologically and emotionally, than the work that we were doing 25 and 30 years ago. When I joined the fire department in January of 1981, we didn't do any of the stuff we're doing now. We went to fires. That was the one thing we did that we're still doing. But we did not have the demand for services related to mental health crises and drug addiction that we see now. And I think we need to understand better how we can engage with the community to reduce the toll that those things are having, not only on the community, but on our own members. And if we do that, I think we can maintain an attractive employment environment. I was really surprised and pleased to see that when Seattle put out an open call for recruitment, the numbers that they received this year were on a par with what they've seen in the past. So, you know, they've got almost 5,000 applicants for positions over the next 2 years.
What would be your position as to working in a collaborative capacity with the district's executive director? And do you feel that would hinder your ability in your supervisory role in the organization?
Well, South King has made a unique investment in its executive director position as a uniquely capable person in that role who's held the position for some time. We tried to emulate that model in Woodinville. We had an administrative chief officer when I was in Woodinville, and I found that to be liberating as a fire officer, in the sense that it gave me confidence that we had somebody with the type of expertise necessary in human resources and in finance and IT and other areas that, quite honestly, as a career fire service officer, I hadn't had opportunities to develop. I've learned more about those things having worked in the nonprofit and the private sector, and feel more equipped to do those things. But I don't feel it's necessary to do things that are already well handled or well done. When I was chief in Skyway, I was also on the board of the King County Fire Chiefs Association, and we met regularly with the King County Fire Commissioners Association. So I engaged with several of your members over the 2 years I was chief there, and had the opportunity to meet Mr. Gaunum a couple times, and certainly was very impressed with his knowledge and skill, and consider him a tremendous asset to the district. And he'd be a tremendous asset to me if I were successful in securing the appointment as interim chief.
I think you answered some of this, Mr. Shaw, but what is the largest fire department you have ever managed, and how does the department compare in size and geographic area?
Well, Christchurch had a population of about 500,000, and the land area was considerably larger than the land area of South King Fire. But it was a combination service as well. We had an annual operating budget of about 22 million, which sounds small considering the operating budget of South King. But there are different cost structures, different currency, different operating environment in that sense. And all of our central services were provided at the national level. So I didn't have that in my operating budget. As far as locally, Woodinville was certainly the largest land area and a population considerably smaller, but obviously a much more challenging labor management environment. Having worked in both Zone 1 and Zone 3, and now technically in Zone 5, I've got a pretty good understanding of how the county system's set up. And, in terms of being able to leverage resources, leverage relationships, understanding the interlocal agreements and how that helps the fire district get its business done is a very important part of the role. So I see King County Fire District, South King Fire's budget is only being part of the puzzle. A fire chief has to manage through those other partnerships, and certainly the Valleycom arrangement, the arrangement with the city of Des Moines for emergency management. All those things are important factors in terms of thinking about span of control and how to mobilize efforts and resources to get the job done.
What do you look for in a job, and how does this job measure up?
Well, I look for challenges, and this certainly seems to have some challenges. I mean, you've got a very solid foundation here. You've made good investments over the past few years, but obviously there's a transition here. I'm interested in being involved in transitions. You can tell from my my CV and my experience that I've held a number of very challenging roles for relatively short periods of time. That's not characteristic of people in the fire service, but it has been a rewarding way for me to develop myself personally and professionally. And I think I've made solid contributions in each position I've held. I didn't move on from any of those positions because I wasn't successful or wasn't welcome. It's that I was able to secure other opportunities that were equally or more challenging. I indicated in my letter of interest that I'm interested in the interim position. I'm not interested in auditioning for the long-term position. I'm interested in helping the fire district position itself for sustainable long-term leadership and deciding what that looks like over the long term.
Describe what approaches you have used to promote diversity in your previous positions and the results of those approaches.
Well, probably the most recent and most direct example is in Skyway. So Skyway has a combination service delivery model. We recruited and selected volunteers in a manner very similar to the way we select career firefighters through a written test, a physical, a CPAT test, and through an oral board interview. There were significant concerns being expressed when I became chief about inherent bias in the process. I looked at the instruments that were being used, looked at the organization's experience, consulted with the volunteer leadership and the union leadership, and made some minor changes in how we administered the process using the existing instruments rather than chucking any of them out or suggesting that any of them by themselves were biased or the source of the bias. We looked at a different way to use those instruments and found that it led us to an even more diverse applicant pool being successful in the interview process. So when we started, you used to start with the written test, and if you didn't score high enough on the written test, you couldn't proceed. If you scored high enough on the written to proceed to the CPAT, but you failed an element or failed to complete, you were disqualified and couldn't participate in the oral board. We changed the process to evaluate the applications and score them, and then compare that with the performance of applicants in each of the phases that succeeded. So nobody was disqualified from any phase. They continued through the entire process. And what we found is that the people who did the best in any one element of the selection process often did substantially poorer than the median in the other areas. And what we discovered is that the people who do just slightly above average across all of the elements typically were the best recruits. We recruited a much more diverse cadre the first time we did that, and all of them were successful in securing career appointments, which was one of our measures of success. You know, obviously, we didn't want to have excessive turnover, but we knew that the model we were using was about developing future firefighters for the rest of King County while meeting our own local needs. And the way that we did that with the selection process, I think, led to better outcomes for the individuals we recruited and produced better outcomes for us because once they were on board, they understood what the expectations of them were to continue to advance in their careers towards career appointments. In the other roles I had, I was directly involved in recruitment and selection and promotion processes, and was involved in appointing a number of women and minorities to positions that had not previously been held by women and minorities. I was very fortunate that we used selection processes in each of those jurisdictions that involved a high level of transparency about the role, the evaluation methods, and the expectations of successful incumbents. And I was able to defend all of those appointments, even though all of the appointments that involved minority and female candidates were challenged through the hiring process, the promotion process.
Describe what approaches you have used to work more closely with the business community and the results you have achieved.
Well, we ran several programs in New Zealand that were very much focused on the business community. And part of that was because there was a lot of concern amongst the business community about the funding model that the New Zealand Fire Service used, which is very different than the one we use here. But without going into the detail about that, we needed to reinvigorate our relationship with the business community. And part of that was done by trying to understand how to position some of our fire prevention and community risk reduction programs in a way that helped them meet their responsibilities as employers, while also helping us gather information from them about how to better serve the community. We had a different model for fire safety legislation and regulation there than we have here. And it was much less focused on what I would call an enforcement model. It was more of a compliance approach. And those are often thought of as synonyms, but they're really very different in their approach. I would characterize enforcement as being somewhat disincentive oriented. Do it or bad things will happen. Whereas our compliance approach was very much focused on do it, and here's all the good things that'll happen. That was the basis for my intervention in Bangladesh. When I got there, the 850 factories we'd surveyed had thousands and thousands of deficiencies. And one of the first things we did is developed compliance plans with each and every factory that were essentially negotiated agreements with clear timetables and expectations that they'd be measured against. And then as they got into that, we started to work with them to identify what I would call them positive externalities. It's a fancy term for what unexpected benefits accrued from their efforts to implement their compliance plans. The first factory that got all the way through its compliance plan, when we interviewed them to have this conversation about unexpected benefits, said, well, our absenteeism rate dropped. The number of employees who called in sick every day dropped by half. The number of people who left employment during the planned furloughs, they break for about 2 weeks around the Muslim holidays of Eid. They said we usually lost 10 to 15% of our workers and had to replace them due to attrition at those times. The first Eid holiday after they completed their remediation of hazards, they only had a 5% attrition rate. They were actually overstaffed. And then we asked them about their fiscal performance. And what we found was that in a business where a good margin, a good month-on-month margin is 2%, they were seeing returns of 10% and more due to fewer interruptions of their production processes due to malfunctioning equipment or due to hazards in the workplace. So we were able to take those experiences, work with our partners in the industrial organizations, the labor movement, and with the training partners and the international aid missions to reinforce the benefits of compliance. Whereas initially the intervention logic when I got there was we're going to threaten them by telling them if they don't get their remediation plans done, we'll pull their production contracts and they'll go out of business. We found that that was a very poor incentive, that it didn't motivate compliance. And as a result, we flipped the script and went for a compliance orientation and enjoyed pretty significant success. By the time I left, more than half of the factories had made significant progress on their remediation plans. And we had not yet decertified any factories from continuing to engage in production.
Describe what approaches you've used to work more closely with neighborhoods or homeowners associations and the results you achieved.
Big effort on that in Portland when I was on a fixed term appointment with the Office of Emergency Management. So we had a program there that's very similar to the CERT program that you may be familiar with. It's Community Emergency Response Teams. Portland calls it Neighborhood Emergency Teams. We had a program that had largely become moribund. There were a lot of complaints from net team leaders and volunteers that they weren't receiving ongoing training, they weren't receiving support. We met with a large cohort of net team leaders in large groups and small groups, and essentially mapped out a way to relaunch that program. Part of the relaunch was about recognizing that the NET program, which had originally been developed on the CERT model as sort of a one-size-fits-all community preparedness program, wasn't working for the volunteers. They wanted more flexibility in how they engaged the process. Some wanted to do more. They wanted to take on more responsibility, and others wanted to do less. And so we worked with them to identify essentially a sliding scale of neighborhood involvement and engagement. The NETs in the emergency team were our gateway to defined neighborhood organizations that were managed through another department in Portland, the Department of Neighborhoods. And we had a very close working relationship with them and with the Department of Parks and Recreation that also had a major community outreach program. So the most important element of this was just getting down to the grassroots level and asking people what their expectation was, what commitments they were willing to make, where we could improve their experience, and where, what we should stop doing that was unproductive. A couple of things came out of that. We launched emergency resource caches so that some of the more active and highly trained groups could deploy in support of our fire department and in support of law enforcement and support the intelligence gathering function of the EOC. And then we had a whole other group of folks who developed a program for bicycle interventions. Seattle's a big cycling city, and we had a group that wanted to use bicycles to move supplies and relay messages that couldn't be relayed by radio and other things. The geography of Portland was pretty well suited to that because in an emergency, the bridges essentially create 4 islands in Portland if you have a major earthquake. So developing an alternative way for the neighborhoods to communicate and meet basic needs was really an important piece. And that came out of the neighborhoods. That was not something that we championed at the Office of Emergency Management. It came up organically through that neighborhood engagement. And they came up with a good idea. We found a way to organize it, standardize it, fund it, and it's been a great success.
Mr. Chubb, a female firefighter complained to you that a male officer has made unwanted sexual advances. How would you handle this situation?
Unfortunately, I've been in that situation on a number of occasions as a chief officer. The first thing that we did was informed the parties involved in the complaint that an investigation would be undertaken. In the last case that I was involved in, the female firefighter who was alleged to be the victim of the complaint said she did not want to pursue the complaint. We had to inform her that that wasn't an option, that we would, however, work with her to protect her from any retaliation in the workplace, advised her of her rights under employment law offered her representation if she chose to be represented independently of her labor organization. We undertook the investigation, found that there had been wrongdoing, and instituted the appropriate sanctions under the collective bargaining agreement and district policies. The most important thing to me is that employees need to know that we'll take any allegations seriously, that all allegations will be investigated, and that if no wrongdoing is found, great. We'll communicate with everybody why we reached that conclusion, and we'll do our best to help restore a productive working relationship, try to get at whatever caused the complaint to arise in the first place. Unfortunately, I can't remember any time when a complaint has been brought to me as a chief fire officer where the complaint was not upheld. Firefighters don't generally complain unless something is wrong, and when it's wrong, it needs to be righted.
Thank you.
An employee under your supervision does not get along well with anyone. How would you handle the situation?
I think you need to get at why that employee has a problem in the workplace. Whether generally when one employee doesn't get along with anybody else, it's usually not the everybody else. It's usually the employee. It's a matter of trying to find out both from the employee's perspective and from their coworkers' perspective where the breakdowns occurred. Is it something that we can manage? I think the most important thing I've found in terms of managing things of this sort in the fire service is to have clear expectations about what behaviors are acceptable and what are not. One department I worked with, I was told, we're a big family. We're going to have our ups and downs. We're going to get along sometimes. We're not going to get along sometimes. And my response was, sometimes some of the most dysfunctional relationships occur in families. And while I'd like to promote the values of brotherhood and sisterhood and the level of trust and confidence that connotes, I have to remind people we're a workplace and we serve a public that has certain expectations of us. And when relationships break down and they interfere with our ability to deliver service, we have to find out why, and we have to take deliberate, concrete steps to repair those breaches. And if they can't be repaired, then we have to look at what it's going to take to either modify or sever the employment relationships that are irretrievably broken.
You have to give a performance evaluation of an employee. How do you approach that?
Well, I think the biggest problems that we have in the workplace with evaluations is not having clear expectations. So, a lot of people approach performance evaluations with trepidation. Others have learned that the evaluations are meaningless. I think it's important to tie employee performance and employee accountability to the business plan and the strategic vision of the organization. I think you've tried to establish that foundation with the bridge plan by saying that communication and accountability are key pillars of your strategic planning framework. You've outlined in previous annual plans and in previous budget documents the values that inform your service delivery model and your expectations of employees. The performance evaluation, the performance appraisal system has to be aligned to that. And we have to have a way of evaluating not just the employee, but the employer and the supervisor's contributions to the employee's performance. If employees think going into a performance appraisal is an opportunity to have a two-way conversation about performance, you get better results. And that was one of the key things that we worked on while I was in New Zealand after we put a new strategic framework for station management and station planning in place, is that we keyed our training and progression system and our workload management systems, and therefore our performance appraisal systems, to the broader strategic and business plans of the organization. And not everybody was pleased with their performance appraisals, but everybody understood where they stood in terms of the larger framework that motivated and moved the organization forward.
So what are some of the major trends that will be impacting the fire service over the next decade? And how do you think South King Fire is positioned to address any trends that may impact us?
Well, I think the biggest trend is just a continued expansion of expectations about our role. The public knows that if there's nobody else to call, they can call 911 and we'll respond. I think we need to perhaps learn to say no or a conditional yes more often. That's going to be very difficult to do. And if we can't do that, we're going to need to find ways of operating as efficiently as we can in that environment. And that means things like mobile integrated health and community risk reduction are going to become much more important elements of how we manage our strategic orientation to the community. I think I would say that this continued growth and demand is probably the biggest trend and biggest challenge. Everybody I know in the fire service who's recognized and addressed that challenge has done so by adding to their capabilities, as South King has by adding an MIH nurse. More and more agencies are looking at how to either partner with other agencies to put boots on the ground. For instance, Seattle's mobile integrated health approach works with the Department of Human Services to put social workers alongside firefighters at low acuity calls with people who have mental health and drug addiction problems. We need to work with our medical directors to expand the options for dealing with people who are in crisis and people who are experiencing substance use disorder. We may need to look at how we partner with more community-based organizations to work with people who are in addiction long-term. One of the things that I think we need to recognize is that this drug epidemic is like none other we've seen before in terms of its long-term consequences. And that's going to create long-term issues for us as a service provider. Funding is going to be a continual challenge. The fire benefit charge certainly positions South King in a much better position because it can accommodate fluctuations in property value better. And it positions you well for an increase in development, which is obviously slated to occur under the comprehensive plans of the two cities you serve, both of which have pretty aggressive plans for developing new housing opportunities. At the same time, we have a funding model for fire services in the state of Washington that was developed in the early 20th century and, in my view, is not suitable for the early 21st century. Of your $51+ million operating budget, only about $2 to $2.5 million comes back to you through the EMS levy for BLS services. And BLS is, I don't have your current numbers because they weren't available on the website, but I don't know any fire department who provides EMS service that isn't responding to 75% to 80% of their calls being EMS, with the vast majority of those being BLS, and that being the primary growth area. ALS calls are largely flat across the county, despite increases in population. So learning to manage low acuity BLS is going to be crucial going forward. I think that's going to require us to work aggressively with our trade associations, the Commissioners Association, the Fire Chiefs Association, and our legislators to have a very serious conversation about the future of emergency services funding in the state of Washington. The property tax-based model and the benefit charge are probably not the best models we could come up with for long-term sustainability. So I think that's a big part of it. You've already highlighted the third area, and that's retention and recruitment. I think the most salient challenge related to those is how we take care of our people, and predominantly in the area of psychological and emotional well-being. We need to do a much better job of equipping ourselves and our staff for the situations they're encountering and knowing how to manage the stresses that they're experiencing so that they don't take them home to families. They don't cause problems outside the workplace or inside the workplace. We really need to help people manage what is a very different environment than most of them signed up for.
Thank you, Mr. Chubb.
I wish I could have
At
been
this time-
shorter about that one.
No, you're okay. With that closes our open session. So the board will convene an executive session for interim fire chief interviews pursuant to RCW 42.30.1101G. To evaluate qualification of the applicant for public employment or to review the performance of a public employee. However, subject to RCW 42.30.1404, discussion by governing body of salaries, wages, and other conditions of employment which generally apply when the agency shall occur in a meeting open to the public, and when the governing body elects to take final action hiring, setting the salary of an individual employee or class of employees or discharging or disciplining an employee, that action shall be taken in a meeting open to the public. Action may or may not be taken after executive session. Joining the board in executive session will be Executive Director Ganem, Executive Secretary Perry, and Legal Counsel. So at this time, we recess for 2 minutes to get everyone transferred into executive session. We anticipate the executive session lasts for 30 minutes. At the end of the executive session, we'll take 2 minutes to recess to get everyone transferred back into special meeting.